Good evening, everybody. We're going to give it about a minute before we start the program. So just hold on a few minutes and we'll get started. Thank you. All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for Cryptocurrency, How to Get Started. Before we begin with tonight's program, I would like to thank our interpreters and closed captionists who are with us tonight. Because of them, we were able to make tonight's webinar accessible to all of our alumni. Speaking of accessibility, we encourage that all participants use a computer in lieu of a phone or tablet for an optimal experience this evening. And if you are joining from a remote location and are currently signed into your company's VPN, we encourage you to close that channel during the program to increase the quality of the webinar's transmission. The webinar platform is secure and does not require VPN access. All attendees are muted and will only be able to see the presenters during the program, but you are more than happy to comment and connect via chat in the chat box. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to type those in the chat box as well. If you do not have any questions during tonight's webinar, please enter them in the Q&A box, and we will address as many as we can during the question and answer portion of the webinar following this presentation. Keep an eye out in that box and make sure to vote up any questions you relate to. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available, complete with captions, in approximately 1 week to 10 days following tonight's event. All participants will receive an email with the link to the recording. Now on to our program. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Manlu Liu, Director of MS in Business Analytics at RIT's Saunders College of Business, and our moderator this evening. Her research interests include community-based open source, community source, accounting and financial analytics, blockchain and auditing, and open innovation in health IT. This research has been published in prestigious academic journals. Dr. Liu is passionate about how business analytics applies to accounting and finance. She co-initiated the Advanced Certificate of Accounting and Financial Analytics and designed and developed the graduate level accounting analytics course. She has been serving as a program chair program committee member for various leading international conferences. She has also had 6 years working experience as a senior consultant. Dr. Liu, thank you for joining us this evening, and I pass this on to the virtual mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and I'm excited to be your moderator this evening. It is my pleasure to introduce one of RIT's own alumni who will be presenting on the topic of cryptocurrency this evening, Mr. Rob Frasco. Rob graduated from RIT in 1988 with a degree in mechanical engineering from the Kate Gleason College of Engineering. Rob is an online pioneer, experienced entrepreneur, and proven product leader that has successfully developed and launched over 50 market-leading products. He built 3 venture-backed startups with successful exits. Rob sold his first company in 1995, pre-Yahoo, to Intuit, and sold his second company to Lycos, where he became vice president and general manager of the #2 internet portal at that time. His third company is currently a market leader within its space, achieving exceptional year-over-year growth for the last 12 years. Rob is now a co-founder and managing partner for COSIMO Ventures, a pioneering deep tech investment firm that helps transform promising disruptive companies into global industry leaders. He is extremely active in deep tech, blockchain, AI, and cryptocurrencies. And without further ado, Rob, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to get this. Going. Hopefully, you guys can see that. Everybody see that? Looking good. What I want to do today is talk about digital assets and cryptocurrencies and everything that's going on out there. It's absolutely the Wild West. And what I thought I would do is try to put digital assets and cryptocurrencies in perspective. I run a venture fund and we focus on companies and projects that are in this space, and we get to talk with a lot of incredible founders. A lot of these founders are in their 20s and their 30s, and I, as a .com guy, I used to say speed is life, and now it's going even faster. And the basis of this is and why you need to really pay attention to this is that my firm, we believe that blockchain adoption mirrors what we saw in the internet back in the 90s and mobile in 2008. And what we see is that blockchain enabled use cases are showing incredible traction and a massive influx of investor capital. And I want to say that this is the single largest value creation event, at least in my lifetime. And I was lucky enough to be part of the .com value creation event. So that's a big statement coming from somebody that was part of the .com. But let me explain why. And then what I'll do is I'll talk about how you get involved in this. Internet protocols, really what they've done, if you think about it, they've basically decentralized almost every facet of our life, right? And the internet itself was actually designed to basically create a communication network that would survive a nuclear attack. If I bombed Chicago, this centralized network had to work. And so the world went from being everything centralized to everything being kind of distributed to now what's called basically decentralization. And when you think about these protocols, as the internet emerged, the kind of phase one of that was really the decentralization of content, right? All of a sudden, anybody could publish anything. I'm a fly fisherman. I could publish information about fly fishing. And I remember as a kid sitting on the floor of my living room watching TV, and there was ABC, CBS, and NBC, and PBS, and that was it. And that's where you went to get your information. And today, we have sources of information all over the world. And so that process of taking this content and decentralizing it, what happened is that as the internet emerged, new protocols, new technologies emerged to essentially handle this content delivery. And the second phase of the internet, and you could argue which ones came first, and I won't go there, but the second phase of the internet was really the decentralization of communication itself. This is things like voice over IP and SMTP when it comes to email, things we take for granted. I'm sitting here in Boston today having a video conference with all of you for the marginal cost of my internet. That wasn't possible before, and it's possible because of voice over IP and video over IP. And so this decentralization of communication was a key invention, and it was a new protocol layered in on top of the internet. And then we saw things like commerce and gaming, and these are new protocols like real-time transparent protocol and transport layer security. So as the internet emerged, these new technologies emerged. And back in 2008, one of the most important things happened And that was a protocol that was invented to essentially decentralize, and it's a big word, but it was really about decentralization of trust, which I'm going to talk about. But when you think about this from an economic perspective, from an investor perspective, each one of these waves of decentralization, what did they do? They were completely disruptive, and they created massive, massive, massive markets. Billions, if not trillions of market value was dislocated to new players. And so every time we see this kind of decentralization, we see this massive market. Now, one of the only things that's still centralized in the world is trust, right? If I want to buy a car from you and you don't know me and I don't know you, what do? We use a trusted intermediary. We use a bank, or we use a brokerage firm. If I'm going to buy a house, we use a real estate broker. Society, our entire world, all of our institutions of society are built on trust. And generally, institutions exist for the purpose of establishing trust. And what happens when you take this central, we've got this resilient network, right, that we've just invented. We've layered content, we've layered communication, we've layered commerce. So we have this network all around the world. And what is the one thing, what happens when you take a central institution and you plug it into this decentralized network? It becomes a massive, non-resilient point of failure. It's a huge weakness. And we've seen this, right? You only have to go to Wikipedia and type in, major internet hacks to get a list of thousands. And this is what happens when you take a central repository, a honeypot, and you connect it to a network. Back in the day when you had a bank, you only had, so many access points. When you connect it to the internet, anybody can access it. That's a problem. So in 2009, Bitcoin was invented, right? And we've heard this story. We've all heard this story. But really, Bitcoin is interesting, but blockchain is really the underlying technology here. And what that's really all about is all of a sudden now, I don't need a bank. I don't need a central point of trust. In fact, what I can do now is create peer-to-peer trust. That's really what we're talking about here. So, a lot of times people use the word Bitcoin and blockchain interchangeably, but what I wanted to do, and I apologize, a lot of you may know how this works, but I like to explain this. If I want to use that, but let's say Monica and we want to have a transaction, right? In today's world, what I need to do is, if I want to give $10,000 to Monica, what do? There's a ledger somewhere that says, probably in a bank, in a database, that says Rob owns $10,000. It's just a collection of ones and zeros, right? And if I want to move that money to Monica, what do? Well, I say to the bank, move my money. And the bank says, fine. And they move it from one column to the other column because they're trusted and Monica has the money. Well, what happens if I get rid of that bank? What if instead of that ledger, I give it to everybody on the network? Everybody has a copy of the ledger. And what I do is I announce to everybody on the network, hey, I'm going to give Monica some money. And everybody on the network, what do? They look in their ledger, their copy of the ledger, and they see that Rob has $10,000. And all of a sudden I give it to Monica. And so they look in that ledger and they see that Rob gave the money to Monica, but they also look that I didn't double spend it. I didn't make a copy of those ones and zeros. I no longer have it. And so what happens here is we ask everybody in the network, do we all agree, peer to peer? Do we all agree that Rob gave Monica the money and Rob no longer has the money? And we ask everybody, hey, did this happen? And everybody says, yep, it did. And now all of a sudden the transaction is validated and voila, we're there. So all of a sudden I have this system that allows me to create peer-to-peer decentralized trust. And this is huge. This is absolutely huge. In fact, if you think about it, what is money? All money is a social institution. It's a tool that's created by society for what? Trust. And so the early, right, it was beads, and then we moved to commodity currency, and then we had a gold standard, which represented value, right, the Medicis, and then we had fiat currencies, and now we have digital currencies and digital assets. So this is a really powerful, powerful concept. Now, if you think about what voice over IP did, it got rid of those central switches. All of a sudden, we can make phone calls peer-to-peer. We don't need a central switch. And in fact, it routed all these phone calls around the monopolists, the people that own the central. So what we've got now is money over IP. All of a sudden, we've got this internet of money, this internet of value, this internet of trust. And it's important to understand that today, very few people are actually in this market. It's early. We'd be lucky if we're at 15% of the market in terms of overall penetration. You know, but what's happening here is that these adoption curves are accelerating incredibly. You know, it took the telephone 25 years to get to 10% penetration and another 39 years to get to 40%. Whereas a tablet received 10% penetration in 5 years, and smartphones, it only took 10 years to go right to 40%. So this market, because it's a network market, is growing way faster. All of these adoption curves, if you look at my chart here, are accelerating. And so this decentralized trust economy is really going to happen a lot sooner than you think. This is going to affect everything: banking, finance, cybersecurity, energy, sustainability, government, voting, legal, media, medical, you name it. If it's got trust involved, and all of our businesses out there have it, this is going to be an integral part of creating more resiliency in our society.
Rob, I'm sorry, your slides aren't advancing.
No,
No, we're still seeing slide 1.
no way. Okay. All right. Let me reshare my screen here. I wish you told me sooner here. 1 second. Let's try it again. Are you seeing it?
Nope, sorry, no.
Yeah, let me try it again, okay?
Okay.
Which one are you seeing? What screen?
Internet protocols have decentralized almost every facet of our lives.
Okay. And you're not seeing the notes page, you're seeing the regular page, correct?
Correct, yep.
Well, 25 minutes in, let's see, let me go to, are you seeing that? Waves of decentralization?
Yep.
Okay, great. Where was I? And voice over IP?
Yep, we can see that.
Well, good news is I've only got a few left. So as I said, the decentralized, this economy is going to change everything, right? And it's really going to change all the institutions of trust that we have out there. And as I said, this is really the largest value creation event since the internet itself. I mean, this affects everything, and it's in the trillions of dollars here. It's really a profound creation, a value creation event. Now, as I told you, I'm a .com guy, right? And as an entrepreneur, and one of the things that I learned very early on was that it's actually not the first mover that generally wins. And in fact, it's really it's the new ventures that come in and they learn from the early entrants and they optimize and then they enter the market. Those are the ones that usually win. And there's some exceptions to that. Amazon is one of them. But if you think about VisiCalc as a spreadsheet, probably never even heard of it. Most of you, Lotus 123, and now it's Microsoft Excel. I actually built a company and sold it to Lycos, which was the #2 search engine at the time. My son's in his 20s; he's never even heard of it. Everybody knows that Google is there. Google, I believe, was maybe the 10th or 11th, if not 12th entrance into the market. So what we see here is that when a market's early, people emerge, companies emerge, projects emerge, and they become leaders. They capture a lot of value, but then what happens is that other people come in and they win. Now, don't forget, I said earlier that only 15% of the world is in this market. What that really means is that there's 85% of the world still left to come into the market. And so you can't really judge how a market is going to succeed unless you've got a heck of a lot more people coming into the market. So is it Bitcoin? Is it Ethereum? Is it new currencies that pop up, like things like NDAO and others? There is a lot of value in going into things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm a huge proponent of Bitcoin and Ethereum. They're the market leaders, just like Yahoo was the market leader back in the early internet days. But don't forget, we've got 85% of the market still coming in. This is a market graph that my firm produced, I would say more than a year and a half ago. This is nothing compared to the companies and the projects that are out there. And they're all different kinds, from the distributed protocols to identity to reg tech to the digital assets themselves, brokerage services, banking, and energy sustainability. It's just a massive, massive market. So with all of this swirling around, right, what we're here to talk about today is, how do I get involved? There is, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I don't have a crystal ball, but this is really very, very early. And so what that means is that there's a lot of room to get into this market, do your research, and really understand what solutions are being created. So how do you get started? And we're going to talk about this with the questions and answers. But first of all, what I would do, and if you're in the U.S. and it's different for non-U.S. people, but if you're in the U.S., I would go open, and I don't have any affiliation with Coinbase, but Coinbase does a great job, and you can onboard with them. They're safe. They handle a lot of the compliance. They're trusted. They handle both accredited and non-accredited investors. I'd open up an account. And then what I would do is I would learn about all the different protocols and technologies and products that are coming out. They've got on Coinbase, some great videos where you can literally watch the videos and earn and get to know the ecosystem. Remember now, we're building protocols that are decentralized. So it's not like one company that has these earnings. What most of these projects are all about are building networks of people. And so that's pretty exciting. So you've got to learn. And then once you get excited about something, then you can put your money where your mouth is, and you can buy in and start slow and see how things work, and projects that excite you, that make sense. And then most importantly, because it's new and because things are just emerging, I would take caution, because this is a crazy market. Things go up very fast and things come down very fast. So I would say that until you really know what's going on, you should only invest what you're really comfortable in losing. So that's kind of the backdrop here, and we can open it up for questions and conversation. And I apologize on the slides. I wish I had that working. All my great graphic design skills.
Apologies, Rob.
No worries, Bill.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah.
So we already have a few questions. So everyone, if you have more questions, this is a time for you to type your question in the Q&A box. So here is our first question. So if we have Bitcoin or Ethereum in platforms like Robinhood, we are only trading them. But how do we use crypto as a currency to do transactions?
Yeah, so I think what's happening right now is that most of the currencies that are out there, so you have to understand what they're used for, what's their utility, and that goes into your overall research. Bitcoin, for instance, was really designed, if you read the white paper, it was really designed to be a transactional currency. And the way it's really being used right now is a long-term store of value, or a speculative currency. What that means is that a transaction currency is high velocity, meaning I'm going to use it and go buy something with it. If I can't use it and buy something with it, then what I'm going to do is use it as a store of value, and I'm going to speculate with it. And so that's really what's going on with Bitcoin. So most people, when they buy Bitcoin, what they're buying it for is a speculation or a store of value. Ethereum, on the other hand, that's more interesting, and not interesting from an investor perspective or a return perspective. I'm not making any comment as to which one is going to go up or down. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not giving any advice here. But Ethereum is a protocol that allows you to produce smart contracts, and these contracts are like collateral, for instance, if I want to collateralize a loan. And in order for me to create that smart contract, I need Ethereum to essentially pay the fees of that smart contract. In Ethereum, they call that gas. So if I want to create a smart contract between myself and you, Manlu, I would write that on Ethereum, and then in order to mint that contract, I'd have to pay a fee, and that fee is in gas, and it's actually in Ethereum. And so there's value in having Ethereum, because if you're creating smart contracts, you need to pay for that with Ethereum. So when you see Bitcoin and Ethereum on trading platforms like Coinbase, like Robinhood, like Kraken, and many of the other exchanges out there, Liquid, there's thousands of exchanges out there. What those are really doing is trading those currencies in a speculative manner.
Thank you, Rob. So we have more questions coming, just to let you know, Rob. Yep. So the second question is, are Bitcoins and NFT similar?
So, okay, I love this question because I love NFTs. So, remember when I talked about blockchain and I said that I was going to make a trade with Monica and I'm going to give her 10,000 Bitcoin or $10,000? What I'm doing, and you remember I said we can't have a double spend. So, what we're doing here is we're using a network of people on the network to guarantee that when I give Monica $10,000, I didn't make a copy of that money. Because remember, money is just ones and zeros, right? So we're basically making sure that I didn't copy that money and keep it in my account. So I'm making sure that I have a unique single transaction. I didn't double spend that money, right? Well, what's an NFT? An NFT is essentially the same thing. What I'm doing here is now with consensus, what I can do is I can create a digital baseball card and it can be completely unique. And the way it's completely unique is that I cryptographically sign it as unique. And now I use this consensus network to say, yep, there aren't any copies out there on the network. This is the only one, and it's cryptographically signed to be unique. It's a non-fungible token. And that is really, really interesting. And so that's what NFTs are all about. Now, what you can do with this digital object that is completely unique, it cannot be copied, it's unique, it's cryptographically signed to be unique. But what I can also do is append information to that token, who owned it, when it was transferred. Maybe I create a, I don't know, maybe I create an artist rendering, and it's by, a famous artist. That famous artist could actually sign it with their key to guarantee that, yep, that's mine. And so this has, remember, because we're talking about decentralized trust. So now what we can do is we can not only create a token that is completely unique, we can also layer in all this attestation to that token by people, and when they attest to something, they sign it with their key, with their unique key. And this is really powerful, very, very powerful.
Thank you, Rob. So I got one question from one of my colleagues. I'm going to let you to guess who is this. So here's the question. Well, you are at IT. Did you ever think that you'll be talking about cryptocurrency?
No. No. It's funny. So I flew jets for the Navy out of our IT. I was a mechanical engineer, and I was always very entrepreneurial. And I was lucky to, half of entrepreneurship is being at the right place at the right time. It's luck, it's timing. It really is timing. And the other half is being smart enough to recognize that you've got perfect timing. Okay, so you could have the best timing in the world, but if you're not smart enough to realize it, then you don't win, right? And so for me, all of this is just a progression of what I learned at our IT, and the practical nature of looking at technology. Investors, technologists, entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, what it's about is being the kind of the Uber user, right? Of whatever it is that you're dreaming about. And that's what, to me, I was, so, I did .com. I was really excited about it, and I made out, right? So my company was 29 years old. Real happy about that. Okay. And then I went to work for some really big companies, and I worked for Bill Campbell and Scott Cook and Bill Harris, and like some really well-known folks. And I met Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all these guys, and that was exciting. But then for me to go do it again in artificial intelligence and machine learning, it wasn't anything different. It was just a progression of the same thing. And so for me on blockchain, again, it's that same progression. There was actually a period of time in there where there wasn't really a whole heck of a lot of exciting stuff going on. I mean, I did a voice over IP company, and mobile was interesting, but blockchain, wow. If you're a student or you're thinking about starting a company or getting into this, there's some insanely incredible opportunity here in this market.
Thank you. So here the interesting
simple question.
Okay, so next question is, the stock market has analysts that cover stocks, and thus the underlying company, you get extensive analysis of earnings, sales, growth, prospects, etc. What is available in this space of similar nature?
Yeah, so let's go back to that statement where I said that only 15% of the world is there. What that means is that when only 15% of the world is there, there aren't a whole heck of a lot of people, A, to know about it, and B, to actually be analysts to tell you whether or not something is good or bad. You know what? I've seen this movie before. When internet companies first emerged, I had one. I had the very first, I started the very first financial service on the internet in 1993. I went to S&P Comstock in New York and said, I want an exclusive for all stock information on the internet. And they said, what's that? And I said, don't worry about it. It's an academic network. And they said, okay, we'll give it to you, but we can't give you the Dow Jones average. Now, right? Isn't that funny? Now that was the reason why I got my company sold, because we had a stock quote server and I had the exclusive on it. But at that time, there was nobody who knew. There were no experts on internet companies and internet stocks and what they did and how they worked and any of that kind of thing. And investors would get involved and they didn't have anything. But what happened? What happened was that the companies and the people that came into the internet market and specialized on it, as that disruption was emerging, they became rock stars. Mary Meeker, Henry Blodgett. I mean, these were guys who, they were nobodies. They were analysts, and they decided to, Danny Reimer, okay? Danny runs Index Ventures in Europe. I mean, these are people now who are rock stars. And why are they rock stars now? Because they were there at the beginning and they specialized in this market, and they brought that knowledge to that market. In fact, that's what we're trying to do here at COSIMO, my firm. What we're trying to do is specialize on this market so that we ride this disruption. So again, another long-winded question. There are analyst firms that are emerging for these projects. I just put one of our projects through 2 analysts. Masari is one of them. Zangle is another out of Singapore. There's a whole host of them. For the most part, they're playback. And what I mean by that is they ask you a lot of questions and then they play the answers to those questions back to the market. There's not a lot of analysis going on, but it'll get there. It'll get there.
Thank you. So next question
Sounds
is,
like an opportunity for somebody.
Thanks. Okay, next question is, can you explain the wallet concept and the thought behind keeping your coins there versus in an app like Coinbase?
Yeah, this is interesting. So in reality, you don't need a wallet. Okay. In the reality, if your tokens are held on the blockchain, you don't need a wallet. What you need is the ability to access your currency on that blockchain through a viewer or a browser or that kind of thing. And that's generally what a wallet is. What a wallet is a way to hold onto your cryptographic keys and unlock your records in a blockchain and make operations happen on that blockchain. It's kind of funny. So here we are, right? Got this technology, and what's the technology do? It decentralizes everything. So we build all these cool technologies to decentralize everything, and we create these currencies. So what's the first thing we do? It's almost comical. We create centralized exchanges to trade these things and buy them and sell them. That flies in the face of everything that we're trying to do, right? Because why do we have a decentralized blockchain? Because we want a resilient network that can't have a single point of failure. So what do? We create these centralized exchanges, which are what? Single points of failure. And so the reason why we've created those is because generally we have to take fiat, we have to take dollars, euro, yen, we have to take some form of other value off that network and put it somewhere. And so that's why we've created things like Coinbase. Eventually, you won't need a Coinbase because once the value is in these networks, you can buy I can buy a Tesla today with Bitcoin. That's a great thing, right? Because the value never leaves the network. It just goes from, me to Elon Musk, and I buy my Tesla. So again, going back, we're only at 15%. We've got 85% to go. How many doublings is that? We got to think through that. The world's going to change. We need on-ramps to these systems, and unfortunately, what we're doing is creating centralized on-ramps. That's why things like Uniswap are so exciting, right? Because it's not centralized. It's a decentralized exchange for decentralized currencies. That makes more sense to me.
So Rob, you just mentioned Tesla. That actually is one of my questions. So Tesla just bought 1.5 billion in Bitcoin,
Yep.
and plans to accept its payment. So what is your opinion about this movement, and how will Tesla's movement impact the industry?
Yeah. So what is the So this is I think it's wonderful. I think it's incredible, and I think it signals that what we've got here is a solution to a lot of our issues around value exchange and trust. Like I told you, I don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin long run. Let me tell you, Bitcoin's got a lot of problems. Okay. And whenever I say that, oh my God, do I get hit with a bunch of haters? Am I long on Bitcoin? Yeah. Do I own Bitcoin? Yes. Am I buying more Bitcoin? Absolutely. Do I believe it's the ultimate long-term store of value? It's actually got more chances not to be than actually does. I think you're going to see central bank digital currencies come out. I think you're going to see highly optimized currencies for various use cases. And you'll see a fragmentation in the market for this. But what Elon Musk is signaling is that the world needs to move to this. In light of the pandemic, in light of what we see the government doing when we see massive amounts of currency being printed, what does Ray Dalio say at Bridgewater, right? Trillions of dollars under management. He says, what, cash is trash? Basically what he's saying is that for you to basically maintain, if you held $1 in a bank account, you got to be earning 18, 19% just to stay even. And so I think what you're seeing is, and that's in the US, that's the US dollar, right? So I think what you're seeing with Bitcoin in crypto is a hedge against that, right? A protection against that risk, that currency risk.
Thank you.
And,
So,
and it is early, right?
yeah,
It is early. I keep saying that, and that's a good thing, right? That means that, you know, uh, uh, and by the way, if you really, if you look at history, it's always the same playbook. It's always the same playbook. It played out in the internet, it played out in the railroads, it played out in telegraph, and it just continues to keep playing out. There's this new technology that comes out. People are inspired by it. People invest in it. The incumbent players, they overspend, they build excess capacity. Okay, so the thing flies up, the bubble builds, they build excess capacity. The incumbent players go, I'm not going to let you eat my lunch, and they put all kinds of fear in the system, right? What did Carnegie say when high alloy steel came out? Right, the trains are going to crash, and then they devalue the market, and all those new players get devalued. The bubble pops, and then the incumbents scoop in and buy all this devalued stuff, and then we're off to the races. Right? At the height of the dot-com bubble, what's the percentage of fiber in the ground that was dark? 80, 90%? We way overspended. What's the percentage of fiber in the ground today that's dark? 0? Right? So what that says is that you got to look at the level of adoption in these technologies and where we are today, and then really understand. And I always look at it in terms of doublings. Currencies are not valued like companies. They don't have earnings. They don't produce products. These cryptocurrencies represent value in a network. The reason why they have to exist, let's talk about this. In a centralized world, it's really easy to figure out how to pay people. If I have a bank and I want to give you money, I want to take that money out of the ATM, who gets paid? Real simple. I take a little percentage off the top and I give it to the bank. And the bank says, I got the money. Thank you very much for paying me to be the trusted agent. When you sell a house with a broker, who gets paid? It's real simple to figure it out, right? Business models are pretty simple. Now, all of a sudden, if I create a consensus network of millions of people doing consensus, what is consensus? They're providing me that trust. How do I pay those people? How do I pay them? Well, I got to create some kind of value exchange in the network to pay the person, all these people, for that trust. So that's why most of these systems have some form of currency, because they have to pay the participants in that network for their help. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that generally the value of that currency goes up as the size of the network goes up, as the velocity of the network goes up, as the amount of things that you can buy and sell, the value of the goods and services in that network. It sounds like the quantity theory of money to me. We're pretty darn close. So when you look at Bitcoin, people say, well, how do you value it? Well, you got to look at the size of the network. How many nodes? What's the velocity of that network? What's the size of the goods and service on that network? And you have to look at that. And there's a lot of academic research with respect to that. But what do we know? What do we know about networks? What we know about networks is that they grow exponentially, right? They grow exponentially. Moore's law, exponential, right? All the stuff grows exponentially. And as human beings, we're linear thinkers, right? Because why? Because if I got to walk from here to here, I'm taking one step at a time. I'm not thinking exponential, but let me tell you, this is all exponential. So if you look at the price of Bitcoin, if you look at the price of any of this stuff, it's really tracking on exponential curves. And so what it comes down to is, what's the exponent? And that's why I always try to think of it in terms of doublings. That's what's exciting here, is that we're at the beginning of a curve There's only 15%. There's 85% left in terms of adoption because these are networks. And so how many doublings is that?
Thank you, Rob.
It's your brain, right? Because we're all, I'm an investor, we're all, P to E. We're all looking at price to earnings and how much do they earn and how many employees do they have? And there's all, we've got an entire industry of analysts that look at all of these things. Whoever asked the question, are there analysts out there looking at this? That's the key, right? Is that it's an entirely different way of evaluating. Remember in the .com days, because I know reach. Remember reach? Everything was reach. How many people? How many eyeballs? What's the reach? Okay. I mean, when I ran Lycos, it was every day. What's our reach? Where did it go? How much did it? And because that's how people value this stuff was how many eyeballs. And even today, it's really about reach because it's really about exposure to advertising. Or the conversion rate, right? If it's e-commerce, it's the conversion rate off of that.
Yep. Okay, Rob, thank you. So next question. So could you comment on the Buffett's opinion that Bitcoin is worthless because it doesn't create more value?
Can I comment on what? On the fact that you think Bitcoin is worthless because it doesn't create value?
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, what it is it is value. It's a store of value, and it's a store of value as treated by the network of people who own it. It's the same thing as any currency. It's a social institution of trust that says this is valuable. There's nothing pegged to any other currency. Right, the U.S. dollar, all it is it's based on the trust of the government to say that we'll back this. The pesa in Tanzania is almost got some value because it's a small network of people that say that there's value. So at the end of the day, who do you trust more? Do you trust a computer algorithm that is that's providing consensus across hundreds of millions, or let's say millions of people? I don't think it's hundreds of millions of people. Or do you trust the Fed?
Yep. Thank you.
So we trust the Fed more. Our society trusts the Fed more, right? Because I can go down to 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee. But you really have to look at it as trust in that network. Now, remember I showed you that graph of all these different projects. Each of these different projects are providing different kinds of value. Filecoin provides storage. So I use a Filecoin to get storage, and that coin is worth as much storage as I want to have on my network. I saw a currency for rendering. So when you want to render a 3D object, you need a high-power computer. You can use this coin to do that. One of the interesting things is this whole DeFi market, the decentralized finance market. Think about this. Why do we go to banks to get cash? So you deposit your money into a bank, and then the bank lends it out. Well, what if I just create a network where instead I provide liquidity to the network, and then the network loans it out with smart contracts. So it's all collateralized, and then I earn, because I'm in this network, I earn a liquidity, a token. I earn a piece of currency that says I'm providing this liquidity. Okay. On top of it, in the smart contract, I might write that I want a 10% yield. So I want a 10% yield on my currency to loan it to you for a year. And because I'm providing the liquidity to the system, I might earn some liquidity tokens, currency to do that. So now I've completely disintermediated the bank. You don't need a bank. It's all being done. It's kind of like crowdsourced lending, but you're doing it in a cryptographically trustful way. That's pretty powerful. Last year, this time, about $2 billion was locked up in the world, only $2 billion was locked up in collateralized digital assets. By June, that number was about 4 billion. By September, it was 8 billion. By November, it was 20 billion. And that number is doubling every 2 months. And the rate of that double is doubling. The acceleration of that double is every 3. So what we're seeing here is a massive ability for people in a network to do basically peer-to-peer lending and doing it in a cryptographically secure, smart contract. That's pretty cool. And again, we're only at 15%. So some cool stuff going on there. It's hard to understand. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you go try to, spend some time reading about liquidity pools if you want to blow your mind. I'm in this. I do this day to day, and it took me a while to figure that one out. But it's exciting. It's pretty cool stuff.
Thank you, Rob. So we have about 15 minutes left, and we have many questions here. So I will try to get as many questions as I can. So Rob, next question. What % of your overall investment strategy would you recommend we devote to crypto?
Well, I'm not going to give any. I'm not going to give any. I'll tell you something. I was just at a conference with Bernstein, and their CIO was saying 5%. I was at another conference, and it was I can't remember who it was. It was in Europe, out of London, meaning on a Zoom call, and they were saying 8%. It really depends on who you are, how much money you have, that kind of thing. There's an interesting phenomenon going on with this. I'm 55. I'm an old man in this market. The majority of folks that I work with are in their 20s and early 30s, not even late 30s. And when you ask them where they're putting all their assets and all their money, they're all in. They're not buying stocks. They are all in on this space. So I think, a millennial or a younger person in their 20s feels a heck of a lot more comfortable buying Bitcoin and Ethereum than buying a share of Amazon. I'm not saying that that's what you should do, not at all. I'm just, making that observation.
Thank you. So next question is,
there's a lot of alpha, and for those of you that don't know what alpha is, that's return. So there's a lot of return in this market, but it's highly volatile. Right? One day it's Bitcoin, one day it's at 60,000, the next day it's at 50. I mean, I owned Bitcoin when it was at 20,000, 25,000, and I rode it all the way down to 3. And didn't, and just held, and I continue to hold and buy more. So, it's not for the faint at heart, that's for sure. So that's why I said, the best thing to do is just learn and experiment and, dip your toe in the water and be cautious, because it is, again, it's early, right? It's very, very early.
Yeah. So next question. Can you speculate how we will be using this? I think this means Bitcoin in 10 or 20 years. That actually is related to one of my questions as well. One Bitcoin cost several cents in 2009 and now cost $60,000 around that time nowadays. So what is your opinion about this trend?
Well, look, banking is too difficult, number one. Regular banking is too difficult, number one. Number two, it's insanely expensive. We move money all over the world, and I can move crypto all over the world in microseconds, okay? I'm pissed off when I gotta let it clear 4 times, on a big transaction. Whereas if I tried to move $10,000 to Greece or Hong Kong, God help you, on a wire. And so the efficiency here is pretty high, particularly with remittance and in these kinds of services and global. This is a global phenomenon. So I believe that digital currencies in some form, everything's going that way. The dollar's going to go that way. I believe in central bank digital currencies, and I believe in actually the expansion of these types of currencies. Bitcoin will be a store of value. It will be used cross border, and now that they've layered in all the anti-money laundering and the KYC, know your customer, the tax man is watching. They're taking out their taxes, so a lot of that regulatory uncertainty is being eliminated. So I believe that what you're going to start seeing is rapid adoption. So let's talk about that. Remember what we said. The value of these currencies is what? The size of the network, the velocity, and the overall goods and service in the network that use it. And it grows at exponential rates because these are networks. And so what that could say is that when people like Tesla, you could buy a Tesla with Bitcoin. Imagine what would happen to the world if Jeff Bezos said, you know what, I'll take Bitcoin too. Now, you could argue Jeff might create his own currency. I think he probably wouldn't do that for antitrust reasons because he already has too much power, but I'm sure he's probably considered it. So when that happens, what happens to the value of Bitcoin? So as more people adopt it, as more goods and services are able to be used for it, then what happens to the value of that network? It grows. So is it conceivable that the value of Bitcoin goes to 500,000? Well, how many doublings have to happen to do that? I personally believe it. I think it's conceivable for Bitcoin to be way up there. It's just a matter of time.
Yep. Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
So here's a very interesting question. The US car industry started with dozens and dozens of automakers. Over time, the industry consolidated to today's handful of major automakers. Will we see dozens of cryptocurrencies as 85% of untapped market convert to users, or because this is my money, the receptivity to new entrants will be limited?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't have a thought on this. I believe that because there's only 15%, and again, I don't even think it's that much, but I think what you're going to see is an expansion, a rapid expansion of highly specialized currencies. And the cool thing about it is that all of these currencies can then be interchanged and traded. So I can trade Ethereum for Bitcoin. And so each one of these networks that are these trust networks that provide certain services are going to emerge. And I do believe that there's going to be an overreaching long-term store of value. I just don't know if it's Bitcoin or not. And then how the government deals with it in terms of central bank digital currencies. I have one company, and we're talking to 3 countries in South America right now. Countries. It's the emerging markets, the EMEs, that are going to go after these first. When you look at things like M-Pesa out of Tanzania, which is run by Vodafone, that's not even on the blockchain, and how it's captured a lot of their currency. The emerging markets are really what benefit from having a central bank digital currency, and I think the digital dollar project, all of these other things, they'll come to be. But I don't know. It's hard to predict. It really is. And then you've got new techs coming out. Hashgraph and some of these other really cool kind of blockchain variants. They're not even variants. They're just completely different technologies. So, you know, I'll tell you a story, true story. So I was at Lycos and I got invited. So here I am. I'm at the #2 portal. I'm the general manager of Lycos.com, and Yahoo's #1, and we're #2. And we would, reach-wise, we would exceed them every now and then. So here I am. I get invited to this conference called Agenda, and it's in Scottsdale, Arizona, at the Phoenician. And I'm sitting in the audience, and Andy Grove is sitting next to me. Andy Grove is the CEO, was the CEO of Intel. And over here is Scott McNeely. He's the CEO of Sun. And two rows ahead of me is Bill Gates. And Steve Jobs is over in the corner. And sitting behind me is John Scully. I mean, I'm like, here I am, like, I couldn't believe it. I was so starstruck. And I'm not generally a starstruck guy, but I was just like, here I am, this kid, because I'm at Lycos. And this guy gets up in the audience. Remember, Yahoo's #1 and Lycos is #2, Excite's #3, Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves, Ink to Me just came out. And this guy in the audience he stands up and he says, how many of you in this room believe that there is a search engine that you have not heard of that will be the #1 player on the internet in 2 years or 3 years? And not one person in that room raised their hand. Not one person. We're talking about the leaders of the technical world in this room, okay? And not one person in that room raised their hand. And you know who that guy was? It was Sergey Brin. And in 3 years, we know how it played out. I mean, a 25-year-old person today doesn't even know who Lycos is. And Google owns the world. And so, it is super hard to predict this stuff when only 10 or 15% of the world is adopted to tech. The cool thing is that, again, this is such a big value creation event that, some entrepreneur at RIT is going to come up with, a killer solution to one of the problems. I say it all the time as an entrepreneur, most people concentrate on problems. Problems are good things in early markets because that's where you go to create value and that's where you go to be an entrepreneur. You look for the problems and you solve them. So problems are good. I love it when people point out problems to me. I love it because that's where I know the value is.
Thank you, Rob. So I have a detailed question for you. Can you explain proof of stake versus proof of work? And
Beautiful.
do you think one has more value than another?
Yes. Great question. Thank you for asking that. This just goes to show you how a market can react to a problem. Okay? So what proof of work is about is that, remember I told you that we're doing this, we got this network, and I'm going to give Monica $10,000, and I broadcast out to the network, hey, everybody, I gave Monica $10,000, and I did double spending. I didn't make a copy of it. So we have to provide some way of checking those calculations. And the way you do it in Bitcoin is you do this thing called proof of work. Basically what happens is that we all validate the transaction. Remember I told you we got to figure out who gets paid? Well, the way that Bitcoin works is that I artificially have to do some work with a computer and solve this problem, okay, that's really hard to solve. And I got to burn all this electricity to solve this problem arbitrarily, okay? And when I solve the problem, I get the right to validate the transaction, okay, and I'm purposely kind of simplifying this so the technical people just do one of these while I talk, because this is not technically accurate. I'm just trying to do this in a way that you would understand. I do this work, and because I do that work and I spend that electricity, okay, and if I win, if I do it first, then I earn a Bitcoin. That's called mining. I earn it, okay, and so it's all carrot. It's all carrot. It's actually stick too because I'm burning all this electricity, but it's all carrot. I give a carrot. I do this work, proof of work. And when I provide the proof of work, I get the right to get paid to provide the consensus. And then once I provide that consensus, then everybody provides the consensus, and then the block gets written. The transaction gets validated and verified. Okay, that's proof of work. Now, that's how all these systems worked in the beginning. And it's super expensive. You're burning all this electricity, you're creating all this, all this value. I have a good friend of one of my investors runs the second largest Bitcoin mining firm in America. And I was talking to him in December. He says to me, we're going to see a Bitcoin spike because in China they have a drought and the government can't, the hydroelectric dams, they have to reroute the water and they have to provide the electricity for the factories. And so they're shutting down the miners. And so when they shut down the miners, there's less consensus going on. And the overall, it's, he's talking to me about how basically electricity conditions in China are affecting the price of Bitcoin because it's proof of work. Remember, so what happened was a bunch of folks decided that there's a better way of doing it. And the better way of doing it is instead of providing a carrot, let's provide a stick. And what that means is that what I do is if I want to become somebody who provides consensus, why don't I, instead of mining, say, I'm going to force you to put your money where your mouth is. So I have to stake $10,000 on my validator. Remember I asked everybody to raise their hand? What if I had to make you stake that and say that if you look at that transaction to verify that it was correct, okay, I had to put my money where my mouth is. So I have to put $10,000 down. And if I'm wrong or I do something nefarious, I lose my stake. It goes away. I get burned, slashed, okay? That's how proof of stake works. And then in doing that, if I'm successful and I stake, I earn some yield, which is just like mining earning. But instead of proving work, I'm proving stake. Now, let's talk about this, because I personally believe that the whole world should operate on proof of stake. Imagine if Congress had to put if you had to be a congressman, you have to put up $1 million stake. So that if you do anything nefarious or you don't meet your promises or you lie or you do all the things that politicians do, you lose your stake. You think the world would be different? So what's interesting here is, remember I told you about all this collateral that's going into these loans and these smart contracts? They're all being validated using what? Proof of stake. And that's powerful because if I do something wrong and I violate that contract of trust, what I get is a slash. I lose my stake. That's the difference. So the whole market is moving to this proof of stake. All these new protocols are all becoming proof of stake.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you again, Rob, for answering those questions and for the great presentation. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah,
we still do have more questions, but I think this is about the time we have. So I'm going to hand it to Victor and Bill to conclude the webinar.
Thank you, Manlu, and thank you, Rob, for again taking the time out of your busy schedule to give us an insight on some cryptocurrency. I know I learned a lot for sure when it comes to all this stuff, and hopefully our attendees here can also get involved with cryptocurrency in the market. But before we end the broadcast this evening, I would like to encourage all of you here tonight to get connected with the RIT Alumni Association via our social media channels such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Links to all those pages can be found in the chat box. Also, make sure to visit our events page for future events coming up throughout the year covering various topics. And again, the link is going to be in the chat box as well, so you can access it there. And then last but not least, many of our RIT family members have asked how they can help our students and the university during these times. And we're incredibly grateful for those who've offered already their help. If you are able to help, we encourage you to support the area that you find most of interest to you. And to do so, you can give via the link, again, that's found in the chat box. Well, folks, thanks again for joining us this evening. And remember, a link to the recording will be sent to all registrants within the next 7 to 10 days. So be on the lookout for that email. Have a great weekend. Stay healthy, stay safe, and obviously stay connected.